Now, this story, it comes partly from my imagination and also from historical facts. Every Christmas, since I can remember, our great Aunt Jenny hand stitches a handkerchief as a gift. Says she sews in all the memories from that year. My memories are intertwined with my cousin, Jenny Rose. She and I used to shadow each other every step of the way. Aunt Jenny would say, close as 2 eggs in a basket. Now, we used to love to listen to the old folks talk. Aunt Jenny would have one of the neighbor women over visiting. They'd be sitting out on the porch. And we'd come around the side of the cabin and kind of lean in and lean in. And Aunt Jenny, she'd catch sight of us and say, my 2 little bunny rabbits trying to get an earful. Now scoot on in here closer so you can hear every word. And she told us that we reminded her of Charlie Franklin. Charlie loved the old folks, said he trusted the old ways a lot better than anything newfangled. He was born over in England, and when he was still just a baby, his family had traveled across the ocean and settled here in the mountains of western North Carolina. He and Great Aunt Jenny grew up together. Now, sometimes Aunt Jenny would tell us about Charlie and his first Christmas away from home. Now, you don't often think about war and Christmas going together. But it was 1914. And over in Europe, the First Great War had started. Now, Charlie went to his mama. He was just 17 years old. He was looking for his first whiskers. And he told his mom, and he said, Mama, I am Brit born, and I'm going. You can't talk me out of it. And our Aunt Jenny, she was just 16 and kind of sweet on Charlie. She hand-stitched him up a handkerchief to take with him. Put his name right across the middle in big blue letters. It said Charlie. And Charlie said he'd keep that handkerchief with him the whole time he was gone. Now, most folks around here, they'd never even been out of the county they were born in. And here Charlie was, going all the way over to Europe. He walked down into Burnsville, the county seat, and he caught a ride over to Bristol. And then he took a train all the way up to New York City. And he found a ship heading across the oceans for Europe. And there he was in France, out in the countryside, just south of Paris. He was in the trenches, dug out holes in the ground. It'd been raining a lot, and then it turned real cold. Where they'd been sloshing around in the mud, now it was frozen peaks of dirt. The staff sergeant had told them, keep their feet moving, so frostbite wouldn't set in. Charlie, he was with the French and the Brits. The Americans hadn't started into that war yet. And across the way, 100 yards, was the enemy in their trenches, the Germans. No man's land, they called that in between. Now, it was Christmas Eve. And Charlie, he was thinking about Christmas back home, wondering whether they'd put out a stocking for him. He usually got an orange, a few hickory nuts, a piece of peppermint. He could just taste that peppermint, that coolness drifting down his throat. He wondered whether they'd save it for him till he got home. Then he felt something cold next to him, and he realized it was the cold metal of his rifle. And he remembered where he was. He was scared. Every man there was scared, wondering whether that next bullet was meant for him. The moon hadn't come out good, and it was cold, dark. Then out of that darkness, Charlie, he said, I heard something. Somebody was singing. Well, it seemed so strange on that battlefield. When he finished, one of those Brits started in singing, God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior was born on Christmas Day. When he finished, Charlie said the quiet was even bigger then. Then I heard something else. One of those Germans was singing. Stille Nacht. I didn't understand the words, but the tune, it was familiar. And I realized that German, he was singing Silent Night. Well, it was so beautiful that it almost took my breath away. And then the French, they started in singing. And the English. And there we were. We were all singing the same song. Singing the same song, but in different languages. Well, I was almost ready to cry. And then I felt the guy next to me, he kind of tightened up, and I saw he had his rifle pointed towards no man's land, and I just naturally picked up mine, and I pointed in the same direction. And I saw one of those Germans come walking across that no man's land, and I thought that singing had it all been a trick. I caught him in my sights, and then I saw he was waving a flag, and it was a truce flag, shining like a star. And he was still singing. And another German got up, and another. And I remembered that sweet Jenny's handkerchief. I took it out and I tied it onto a stick, and I started towards the middle. My buddies, they were there following me. And there we were in the middle of that no man's land, still singing that song. Once we finished the song, all of a sudden a ball appeared. And somebody knocked it. I was just watching, and a Brit ran up to me, and he said, "Just kick it, mate, just kick it." So the next time it rolled by, I kicked it, and I started running, laughing, trying to find that ball in the darkness. Someone yelled, "Can't see, light up the flares." Before we knew it, there were flares lit up all the way around, ringing that no man's land like it was a playing field. We must have been out there for hours. Then a few of us gathered around one of those flares like it was a warm fire, exchanging souvenirs and chocolates and cigarettes. One of those German boys took out a photograph and showed it to me. Must have been his family. I took out one of my family and I pointed to it. We were all standing in front of the cabin, and I was in the picture, so I pointed to me and then back here, and it was like we were talking, even though we didn't understand each other's words. All too soon, first light of dawn come in the sky, and France was France again. The Germans, they started heading back for their trenches, and so did we. I caught sight of a fella, a young German soldier. He smiled at me, and he smiled just like Danny Harmon back home. But I knew it wasn't Danny. We stood there looking at each other, and then he turned around, went back to his trench. I went back to mine, picked up my rifle, and got ready for war again. But things had changed. Whoever was there that night, whenever we were looking down the sights of our rifles, we were wondering who was on the other end, what family we'd be killing into. Things had changed. Well, Charlie Franklin, he came back here to the mountains after the war. And Aunt Jenny would tell us how they'd always go out and visit the old folks, because that's what Charlie liked best. And he'd tell them about his Christmas in the trenches. Then Aunt Jenny's voice, it'd go down to a whisper. She'd tell us how it wasn't 18 months later that Charlie Franklin died, took sick with influenza and passed away. And Charlie's mama, she gave Aunt Jenny that handkerchief. And every Christmas, Aunt Jenny wears it tucked in her sleeve like it's a piece of fine jewelry. And she says, "Oh, girls, if only we could keep Christmas in our hearts all year long." Charlie's truce flag. Thank you. And I was inspired with that story by a dear friend's amazing song called Christmas in the Trenches, John McCutcheon, a dear friend for many years. Back in the 1970s, I saw him on stage as a musician. And I thought, God, wouldn't that be cool to be able to do that and travel around like John does? He goes to schools and libraries and festivals, and he was an inspiration to me. Back in 1972 is when I first met him. And 3 years later, I was doing that. So once again, thank you all. A delight you have been. Thank you.